Once again, Pitt falls in defeat to the University of Miami. It seems like every year, no matter how good Pitt looks, the superior athletes at Miami somehow come out victorious. We'll discuss that and more on this week's Hail to Pitt podcast.
What was your message about finishing it in these final 30 minutes?
Well, it happened in West Virginia where we knocked off number 2. It happened in South Carolina, and it's happening in Pittsburgh today.
Our guys had a lot of guts tonight. We're just going to keep getting better. I mean, that's what it is.
One hell of a game that you will never, ever forget. We shocked the world! Hail to Pitt.
Hail to Pitt. This is the week of November 6th, 2021. And this is the Hail to Pitt podcast. I'm Alan.
And I'm Vince.
What do you want? What do you want from me? Pitt did a Pitt thing against Miami. They lost. Get off me. Leave me alone. Why are you here? Why are you bugging me, Vince? Why are you making me do this show this week? I mean, we knew it all would happen, but I didn't feel like it would happen, but it happened, and it's all over just right when it started. The most hope I've ever had pretty much as a Pitt fan, totally gone in 1 week. Damn it.
Yeah, Alan, I don't know if I want to do this show any more than you do, but it's going to be hard to talk about, but we're going to get through it together.
I guess we'll try. That was a rough one. The interceptions, the penalties, the terrible call in the fourth quarter when a safety was made but not granted to the Pitt Panthers. You know how it went down. And unfortunately, it results in Pitt really in a situation that is completely different from last week. No longer the darling of the ACC, and more so, I'd say, a joke, at least to Pitt fans who have followed this team and know how it goes whenever opportunity is presented to them. And it usually turns out this way, unfortunately. But we're going to break it all down with you, and we're going to get through it together like Vince said. At H2P Show on Twitter, if you want to interact on social media. Hail the number 2, pittpodcast@gmail.com. If you want to email long form, we appreciate any feedback you give us on Panther Lair, Reddit, or wherever else you're talking Pitt and hailing to Pitt. We're brought to you by Pretty Easy Podcasts. You can go to prettyeasypodcast.com right now to start your own podcast on any subject. Get all the help you would ever need podcasting, your own producer, all the help you need editing and posting your show to all the platforms at an affordable rate. We're talking about an extremely affordable rate. If you're an up-and-coming podcaster just getting into it and you think you need a little help, seriously, go to prettyeasypodcast.com. You're going to be able to get a rate that's going to totally be in your budget and help you get your show done. The one you have in your mind right now, you say, oh yeah, always thought I could do a podcast. They make your dreams come true. Go to prettyeasypodcast.com.
And just like a Miami screen pass, they make podcasting pretty easy.
Screen passes, penalty. I don't know. I'm not upset about the screen passes or anything that Tyler Van Dyke did against Pitt. Knew the luck would run out for the secondary, Vince. Knew it. Even against a young guy like that. What I'm most disappointed in is the offensive line just totally showing up and doing what they've done this year to the worst degree. Penalties, and then not even protecting, and then not even run blocking. Just really poor performance on their part. I put the blame pretty much squarely on that unit.
That's interesting. I'm not going to put it solely on the offensive line, although they certainly did not play great. Penalties for sure. The tackles, Carter Warren, Gabe Hoyt, they were getting beat, rather handedly, I guess. Too much by the Miami speed rushers, for sure. But at the same time, Pitt did put up 34 points, and Kenny Pickett did throw for 500 yards. So I'm not going to totally say it was all on the offensive line, Alan. But probably the most disappointing part for the offense to me is, the fact that, this was I believe it was a tie game or a one-score game. I believe a tie game actually with just I believe with 20 minutes to go. I'm checking that right now. Yeah, tied at 31, 20 minutes left. Miami did score, on their next possession, but Pitt only being able to get a field goal the rest of the game. For an offense that was doing that well was rather disheartening, specifically whenever they had that 1st and goal from the 5 and only ended up with a field goal there whenever they were down 7, had a chance to tie the game. I don't know what to say, specifically those play calls, running a trick play, running a fade pass to a running back. I mean, you've been running rather successfully on this team. You have Kenny Pickett. Why are you doing these low percentage plays? I just did not get it at all. As good as Mark Whipple's been this year, that play calling was really a head scratcher.
I understand why you'll look at that and say, here's an issue. But really, I'm telling you, look at this offensive line. They were the cause of this loss.
Yeah.
Situationally,
Okay.
Kenny Pickett was put under pressure on big plays. Situationally, they had horrible penalties. And of course, again, penalized for more yards. Only one more penalty than Miami total, 9-8, but still 107 to
Way
72
more yards,
yardage wise, way more yards. The holding calls, and just not being disciplined, and forcing Kenny Pickett into throwing 55 times because this game was, so close, and really a comeback situation from the get-go, because, Miami scored 3 straight times. And the offensive line early on just wasn't prepared. There was no running game.
Yeah.
There was no tone set physically by the offensive line. Now, we see some play calls, some, issues with Kenny Pickett and receivers maybe not being on the same page. But really, when it comes down to it, up front, Pitt did not dominate. Pitt did not protect. Pitt did not play well.
Yeah.
And that's why they lost.
Yeah, gave up 4 sacks, 8 tackles for loss. The 7 QB hurries, which did result in, a couple bad interceptions. There was coach kind of noted that there was some, misreads or something, but, pressure certainly had something to do with that. Alan, are you a little surprised that, there were no substitutions made on the offensive line, given how bad they were doing?
No, I'm not surprised, because, I don't think they trust or are willing to go too deep into the depth chart. So, seeing Gabe Poy being stuck out there the entire time, especially a guy who somehow won an ACC player lineman of the week just a couple weeks ago, even though he's in this game constantly making errors, constantly giving up, pressures onto Kenny Pickett, holding calls, they're going to be left in there. That's just who is being trusted and who they're going to trust in a situation like this, especially when the game's close. So that doesn't surprise me. What surprised me was just the pass protection, how that kind of just fell apart, where you've even said the last few weeks, Vince, maybe they don't run block as well, but they're getting better at that. And the pass pro has been great, or pretty damn good. But in this game, it wasn't good at all. Kenny Pickett was under duress. Kenny Pickett, I will, of course, fault him for throwing the picks ultimately. But, in a game where you were playing comeback the whole time and being kind of forced to throw, he's running on almost every play, or he's in motion and not being set. It's just the offensive line was not good in this game. It's easy for me to pick apart who caused this loss. That unit played poorly.
And the thing about it to me is, Alan, yes, Miami's got a ton of talent, and I don't think anybody would disagree with that. Despite their 4-4 record, and they're going to have great defensive linemen there, but Clemson's got a great defensive line too. They got a lot of talent there, and Pitt handled them, absolutely handled them. And then to come around 1 week later, you can't tell me that Miami's D line's that much better than Clemson's. I mean, these guys just didn't come to play on the offensive line. Simple as that.
Exactly. So yeah, you're not going to tell me that guys like Zach McLeod and Gilbert Frierson are better than anyone on Clemson. But on this particular day, they came out ready. And that young Miami defense, give it up to them. They came out there ready to attack and make plays. They made plays. Then
Yep.
that was the difference. Pitt's offense went out there and performed a little bit less than what they were expected to. Miami's defense performed a little bit better than they were expected to. And then in terms of Pitt's defense and Miami's offense, I feel like that situation was exactly as I was expecting. I expected Pitt's secondary to go out there and give up some plays because their luck was bound to run out in terms of their clean sheets, not being called for anything, not giving up big plays. They did that. They gave up some big plays. Rambo went out there, played pretty damn well. And give it up to the youngster, Tyler Van Dyke. He went out there and was fearless in throwing the ball downfield. But that part of the game did not matter because what was supposed to be the difference was Pitt's offense was supposed to go out here and clean up on Miami's defense, score over 50 points and win the game. They didn't, and they lost.
Yeah, I mean, we both thought that, Miami or Pitt was going to score in the 40s. And it just didn't materialize. And
they would have won.
They had opportunities to. There's no doubt about that. They could have tied the game at some point. And we talk about how Pitt's defense did not play great. Over on those quick screen passes to the outside, I believe it was over 100 yards given up on those plays alone. And you could talk about the bad officiating all you want. I've seen a lot of stuff on, how guys were getting, illegally blocked downfield on those screen passes before the ball was in the air. You saw, we talked about the safety. We talked about even on that same drive, the play after the safety, there was a real good picture I saw of Haba getting held in the end zone, which would have resulted in a safety there. But still, you got to be able to overcome that stuff. If you're that good of a team, you'll be able to overcome all that stuff. The defense, they not great after that first quarter, they really settled down, and I thought they played fairly well. They gave up those huge plays, gave up 21 points, really quickly. But after that, they played good enough to win. Now, granted, they did dig a pretty good hole there, but Pitt's offense just not enough to get them back in the game. And you got to feel that if they did get the lead at some point late in that game, I felt like the offense would have been able to, get the key plays, the key first downs, the key runs. To run out the clock there, but they just couldn't do it. They just couldn't get back into it.
Yeah, the fact of the matter is Pitt is the better team. They were the better team, but circumstances and just a couple of splash plays, and that's how football goes. Going on to that missed safety call, that it was crucial, and it's heartbreaking. And I don't know how to deal with that. I'll be honest, because if that's called properly, it was an obvious safety, but the way the game goes, how it's initially called, and then of course you go by the whatever camera caught it at that time. They couldn't officially call it a safety, but it's BS. That was a safety. If it's a safety, I think we all know, and any Miami fan will tell you if they're honest, Pitt was going to win that game. But that's just not how it shook out. And that's why you go to the point that you have to overcome, if you're the better team, circumstances like that. Whenever something happens like that, you need to be able to win still. But the game was too close for Pitt to overcome a big missed call like that, and they lost. So I don't know who to blame. I'm going to direct my disappointment inward at the Pitt offensive line, at some of the missed opportunities Pitt had in this game rather than the referees. But the referees did, make no mistake about it, blow that effing safety call. Damn it.
Yeah. I mean, it wasn't just that. I mean, there were some personal fouls, some roughing the passers. I mean, it was just.
Oh, this thing was like in the first half was pretty much a brawl. It was turning into a dirty, a near ugly game with what was going on extracurricular. It settled down, but then just missed call after missed call too on both sides. And then it felt like makeup calls too were being made. It was just not a pleasant game.
No, it was difficult to watch. Very difficult to watch, but you can't just you can't just throw up your hands and say, that's the end of the season. There's still a lot to play for.
That's true. And moving on from the Miami game, 38-34, Pitt loses, and they fall to 6-2 overall. First ACC loss, but still alive in the hunt for an ACC championship. What does an ACC championship mean in 2021? Probably not much more than
I don't know about that. It's still a chance at a New Year's Six bowl is what that'll get you, which is an excellent showcase, an excellent opportunity that if you win that game, and specifically depending on the opponent, that's great for the program. To win a conference championship. When's the last time that happened? This is Pitt still has an opportunity to do stuff that hasn't done in a long time, or rarely does. And that's you look at this and you say, if before the season I told you that Pitt was going to be 6-2, 8 games into the season, and they were going to control their own destiny in the ACC Coastal Division, I bet the majority of people probably would have signed up for that.
I would have.
Yeah, but the way,
because I did not expect this.
Yeah, but the way things have fallen, it's just a little disappointing. And if you keep changing your expectations every week, eventually you're going to be disappointed.
That's true.
And the biggest thing for me that I really wanted to see was to win this game, to see these college football playoff rankings come out, which Pitt is ranked, by the way. So I think that's an excellent thing in the program, and they have a chance to move up in those. They're obviously not going to get into the top 4 now, but they could still finish very well depending on how they do these last 4 games. But if they would have only had one loss at this point, to see where they would have been ranked, to be able to map out what needed to happen in order to get into that,
to be in the conversation,
top 4, to be in the conversation. And, there was a huge article on ESPN.com this past week that laid out how Pitt is actually a really good team, based on all this computer nonsense, and how, they were ranked, with the 6th best team, and how they, if they probably needed several things to happen, but if they, won out the rest of the way and finished with 1 loss, there was a very good chance they were going to make the playoff. And that was so much fun to talk about. It would have been really fun this week to actually see it on paper, but it's not happening, unfortunately. So they gotta pick it up, and they gotta put that loss behind them. They gotta come out snorting this week.
Duke, of course, up next. I'll say this after the loss. I mean, poor performance and what we've seen up and down now this year, I think Pitt this might be bold, Vince. Tell me if I'm wrong. Pitt on the best Pitt day there could possibly be for this team in this season. I think they could beat any team in college football except Alabama.
Yeah, you might be right. You might be right on that. I mean,
On the best day, Kenny Pickett firing on all cylinders, offensive line not making a bunch of boneheaded mistakes, and the defensive line attacking quarterbacks the way they can, and the secondary not getting penalized all game. Pitt can, I think, beat any team except the Alabama Crimson Tide. That's including the Georgia Bulldogs, who have the best defense in all of college football, but they haven't faced a quarterback like Kenny Pickett.
no, they have not.
Hardened.
They have not, and that would have been a very intriguing matchup had that happened. I'm not saying Pitt would have won the game, but I think they could have. They had the potential to make things interesting.
I think Georgia could lose 2 more games and we'll get them in the Fiesta Bowl or something, or a or one of the whatever the non-playoff bowl games are.
I don't think so, but yeah. I mean, it would have been nice to see something like that. Who knows? But on to this week's matchup, Alan. Pitt taking on Duke in Durham, North Carolina, and Duke not good this season at all. Coming in with a 3-5 record. They actually started out 3-1, but since ACC play have started, they have lost 4 straight ACC games. The last 2 or 3 out of these 4, and especially the last 2, very embarrassing. They lost 45-7 against Wake Forest, 48-0 against Virginia a few weeks ago. Before that, they lost 38-7 to North Carolina. This team has been getting blasted. It just all those games were on the road, but they are just getting destroyed against teams, specifically tremendous passing offenses, which Pitt does have. So you got to think, Alan, I know you love talking about get right games. This game is coming at the right time.
Oh, this is a Haba game. If there ever was one, I mean, getting after this Holmberg this week at the quarterback, and Kenny Pickett padding those Heisman stats. Although he's probably out of the running because with 2 losses at quarterback, you have to do something crazy to be invited to New York now, Kenny. I don't know, like throw 800 yards on Duke, 8 touchdowns, and then do that the rest of every game. I don't know how he would get invited. But offensively, Pitt is just so superior to this Duke defense. I'm not even looking out for. I don't even care really much about Pitt winning. I know they'll win. They are by far the better team, and it's not even close. But can they go out there and just win this game and like Wake Forest did, just go out there and pound on this team, not be stupid offensively on the offensive line, don't get caught for holding constantly, and just go and win convincingly? Because that's what you need to do after a loss against Miami. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't think anyone in the locker room thought, oh, we'll beat this Miami team. We're better than them. Miami went there. It was a legitimate test, and Pitt failed it. Barely. They barely failed it. They could have won it. They were in it, but they failed it ultimately. Against Duke, not only do you have to win, but convincingly to just get right within the ACC circles. Stop thinking about playoff. Stop thinking about anything else nationally, Heisman, whatever. That's all gone. It's back to just living in the ACC bubble and getting the job done, because Pitt still is on a path where they can maybe collide with Wake Forest in the ACC title game.
Yeah. I mean, the goal of winning a conference championship is still there. And if you look at the standings, and you look at Miami's remaining schedule, they have a fair chance to win out. I mean, they are a 4-4 team, but they're playing very well right now. So if they do win out, Pitt would have to win out in order to make it to Charlotte. And it's going to start with this game against Duke here, and they got to just take a game by game. They got to win every single one of these games in order to make it, I think. And this Duke is a good place to start. Alan, they have. I will say, I think the defense really needs to come out and prove that they're recovered from that beating against Miami, because they got pushed around. And if you look at Duke, they do have a good running back in Mateo Durant, and they've shown the ability. They got an accurate quarterback, Gunnar Holmberg. He's been pretty accurate on the season, so I imagine that could give Pitt some trouble. Those guys in combination there, so they're going to have to be ready for that. But at the same time, you look at it and it's like, how good could they possibly be? I mean, they're getting just absolutely destroyed against the competition that they've gone up against, and the offense. I mean, everybody's been able to score on this team. So, the offensive line, they got to come out ready to play, shrug off that last game, and just go out and start pushing people around.
Yeah, this is a game where I think having Kenny Pickett at quarterback will be huge and very beneficial, because the short-term memory aspect of the game, he does that very well. So I think Kenny will forget the Miami loss quickly and bounce back and perform well against Duke. But watching everyone else will be interesting. Pitt will win. But yeah, will it be close is the question. If it's close, that's an embarrassment. That'll be worse than the Western Michigan loss. And the thing about this, Vince, too, is I'm looking at the schedule and my preseason prediction pad here. So now the rest of the way, I did have Pitt winning the rest of these games, I believe. So winning out and getting to an ACC title game, according to my preseason prediction, seems feasible. And that's been adjusted for how impressive Pitt has been. So I'm liking our chances still at talking about an ACC championship game, although that game probably won't be a play-in at any sort of playoff.
Oh, well, it could be for Wake Forest if they're the ones that are there, and if they continue to win the rest of their games. We'll be talking about that a little bit at the end of the show.
Unless Tim Duncan suits up to play football for them, the committee will never vote, even for an undefeated Wake Forest team, into the playoff. I don't see it happening.
Well, I don't know. We'll see about that. I still think they have a good shot.
They are the real team in control of the ACC and their destiny. They still have NC State ahead of them, though, correct?
They got NC State, they got Clemson, they got all their toughest games out of them. They got Pitt, hopefully,
and hopefully Pitt. Although Pitt, technically the easiest route to the ACC championship game.
I wouldn't say that, because they still have to win. They still have to win all these games. They got a bugaboo in North Carolina. They got Virginia, who is just scoring at a tremendous rate, but can't stop anybody. And then a pesky Syracuse team, Alan, who looks like that they're going to have a good shot at being bowl eligible this year. Who's been sneaking up on some teams. That game on the road, last game of the season, that may not be easy either. But we'll see where things stand in a few weeks. I think we'll have a good idea, in about 10 days time or so after that North Carolina game. We'll kind of know where, if Pitt's going to do this or not.
Okay, then. So you won't concede Pitt has the easiest route to the ACC title game to me then, but you can at least tell me this week that this week is Pitt's easiest game the rest of the season.
Yes, absolutely.
And then there you have it. Duke should be a chip shot for the Panthers. And, we didn't really call Western Michigan a chip shot. This is more so a chip shot, and especially with a team that's been hardened, battle-tested, embarrassed, disappointed. I mean, really, there's no excuses the rest of the way for the Pitt Panthers.
No, there's not. Well, first of all, I'll say this is, and you looking at Pat Narduzzi's career here, his teams have never quit on him. Usually after a loss, they come out really fired up. We talked about it earlier this year, Alan, where they could have rolled over after that Western Michigan game. No, but they didn't. They come out and they went on a nice winning streak. They're going to have to do the same thing here. And this team, they still have a lot to play for. They still do. They
have all of it to play for, pretty much. So they just have to get through this week of a lesser opponent, I guess. And this will be another test of Pat Narduzzi and how he coaches and prevents players from quitting on him, like Vince said. And I think we should all be pretty confident in that because he does have a good track record of preventing that. So we'll see where Pitt takes it. But the loss to Miami kills any hopes of an unbelievable thrust forward for the Pitt program, but still, as Vince put it earlier in the show, an unprecedented opportunity still ahead for the Panthers. Conference championship, and really a way more feasible conference championship than even a few years ago in a year where they actually made it to the title game, Vince, where they had no chance of winning that game.
Yeah. I mean, well, let's look at it this way. I mean, Pitt has only hasn't won 10 regular season games since 1981. That's 40 years ago. Pitt has only won 9 regular season games once in that time period. So, and they have an opportunity to do both those things and set some high water marks here in a season where I didn't see a whole lot of people predicting, a 10-2, 11-1 season, even though we all wanted to. Nobody was really willing to do that.
Not me.
They've been a fun team to watch, frustrating at times for sure. But I think assuming they go out and take care of business this week, get ready for that big North Carolina game. If they can get past that, I think everybody's attitude is going to feel a whole lot different. Even next week at this time, I think everybody's attitude is going to feel a whole lot different. Winning can cure a lot, specifically for an attitude. I saw people talking this week saying that they need to fire the coach, and this is just. I mean, I don't know. Yeah, was it a bad loss? Sure, but if that was, that Miami team was a preseason top 15 team, a Miami team that has a ton of talent. If you go by recruiting rankings, if you believe those, they have way more talent than what Pitt has for sure. I mean, they hadn't done great this season, but now it all of a sudden seems like they're catching lightning in a bottle.
Yeah, it's kind of exciting. I'll even say I'm not as a Pitt fan who openly roots against Miami. I mean, seeing from as an outsider's perspective, looking at what a guy like Tyler Van Dyke comes in and does for those few games, like the future for him at Miami, like they could have a huge ordeal going on down there with that quarterback and what they put around him. Like that guy went out there and was fearless. I was very impressive. I really, really, really came away from that game respecting the U's new quarterback, at the very least. Whether Manny Diaz sticks around to coach him is another thing. And coming out of that game, I know that there's been buzz around maybe a switch in the program there, but when you have a young quarterback like they have, and the building blocks around him already in place, like changing things, like maybe their best bet would be to stick the course and see where it turns out, especially in a conference that changes all the time like the ACC.
Yeah, Alan, there's no doubt about it. I mean, they've recruited extremely well. And, if you have a really good quarterback to go along with that, they could certainly be a force to be reckoned with. It probably wouldn't, it's not going to really affect Pitt because they're going to struggle with him anyway. But, for the rest of the Coastal, that spells bad news.
I'm just kind of jealous because it's like they almost have a Kenny Pickett situation, but at the very beginning, and we're ending our Kenny Pickett situation.
Well, I don't. Well, I got a lot of thoughts on that, but I'm going to save them for a later time. Not looking at this as bleak as everybody else. But that Van Dyke, if you looked at him, I think he's been playing football a lot longer than Kenny Pickett has, just by his face.
I don't know what that means. Are you accusing him of being like a Danny Almonte, lying about his age?
He looks pretty old. That's all I'm going to say.
Well, he probably enjoyed some cold ones, or maybe maybe some warm ones because he's so old and grizzled after that loss. But he earned it. He played well. Pitt lost, and after a loss like that, it's tough to go online and read what people say because it does trend towards the super negative and bleak. But we'll just take a quick dip and get out real quick as we hit the Pitternet.
Can you explain what internet is?
I hear there's rumors on the internets.
And to all those faceless keyboard warriors on Twitter.
But we're a good darn football team. I'm proud of these guys.
At Into Pitt on Twitter, Vince said, #Pitt lost, but that non-safety call will go down in history as the worst I've ever seen in college football. I mean, that's total hyperbole. There's been some terrible calls in the history of college football. This was one of the worst against our team, I'll say, in recent memory, but I mean, still, it's so hard to get mad at just the safety when other things in the game went wrong for Pitt and were caused by themselves.
Yeah, there were probably other penalties that are more, worthy of getting upset about. This was just happened to be at a terrible time in the game, and it was very difficult to see given the camera angles available. Alan, I wish I had saved this. I did see somebody on Panther Lair say this. I'm not going to take credit for it, but they were talking about how if this game was on ESPN and not ACC network, so in other words, a network that you could respect and trust, there would have been more camera angles available, probably like a Sky Cam or something that would have a lot better view of this.
That is heartbreaking because we've been talking about Pitt on respectable cable channels the last few weeks, and then they play on the rinky-dink ACC network, and this happens. Coincidence? I don't know. You be the judge. It's stupid, though, to think that it depends what channel your team's playing on to get a fair game called in college football.
Yeah, with all the technology that's available, especially with Miami, who was using extra illegal technology in this game, you'd think that that kind of stuff wouldn't be a problem, but apparently it is.
Add into Pitt, I appreciate the sentiment. I won't agree the worst call ever in college football, but the fact that we can't get consistent calls in college football these days is a joke. Pitt not getting that safety, a joke, but the game being as close as it was, also a joke. So,
yeah.
Horrible Saturday. Let's move on. Let's leave the fake world of online in the Pitternet, even though it's entertaining. And let's get back into the real world. Is there any optimism around town anymore, Vince? Because I'm out here in Firenze, in Florence, Italy, and really there's no buzz. It's not even the home of Haba. all people here are talking about is All Saints Day and how blessed we are to be rid of Halloween and the scourge of Americans getting drunk and dressing up and being spooky. That's all I hear about here. So no one's talking Pitt over here.
People are talking about it, and I'd say the vast majority of people are just they're very disappointed, but at the same time it was like they were kind of hoping for disappointment just so they could be like, see, I told you they were going to lose. That's kind of the feeling I got, which is pretty disheartening, and it shows that those people aren't real fans, if you ask me.
They're just hoping for the worst oftentimes, but then every now and then you run into an Italian who says, Dan Marino, Italiano. That's a good feeling. And every now and then you run into someone around town who says something that makes you feel okay. Maybe they did this week. I don't know.
Another Saturday coming, and the Panthers are playing. Time to find out what the Yinzers are saying.
Man, that game was just disappointing. I mean, it was almost as bad as when Hills had no shovels in 1993.
Yeah, that line for popcorn was real long because nobody had power then.
You think Pickett will still win a Heisman?
Nah, they'll probably just give it over to some running back from down south, or maybe like a Notre Dame quarterback.
Hell to Pitt.
What the Yinzers are saying.
So that's what the Yinzers are saying. Just a really big letdown this past week, where it really looked Pitt was going to making legit national news, but it's just not happening. But as we said, they still have a chance to climb back up in there. Alan, not a tremendous slate of college football games around the country this week, but I do want to talk to you about these rankings these playoff rankings that just came out a few hours ago.
Oh, college football! Don't you dare think you're going to keep Pitt out of the top 25, because we made it finally. Vince, is this our first appearance in a college football playoff ranking?
I don't know. I know during Narduzzi's first season, I believe they were 6-1 at one point, and they may have been ranked in those. I don't remember. But yeah, another thing I've had to tell people this week that I've been trying to tell people that the real rankings don't come out until the beginning of November, and then they just sound so confused. Because they open the paper every day and they see what the rankings are, but I tell them that those ones don't count, and that these ones do, and I just know I'm going to be I had to hear about how Penn State was ranked and Pitt was not in some poll this past week, but in the real rankings here,
team you mean that plays over by the sheets that I always stop at on the way to my dad's?
Yeah, that one.
Oh. They're ranked. I can't even believe it.
Well, but not in the rankings that count.
Oh, this week, the rankings are out, and we can sink our teeth into those. Wake Forest has the highest ACC ranking. Michigan State is on schedule to get into the playoff. Highly doubt that happens. The Big 12. Totally absent. It's just it's one of the more bizarre first weeks of college football playoff rankings, I think, that we've gotten, just in terms of what preseason was telling us, and also what we've seen from the eye test. Like, I still don't believe Michigan State is quality enough, and even with Oregon's pretty quality wins they've had, I don't think they ultimately belong there, but they probably will end up getting there by the way things seem to be shaking out.
Well, all right. Well, who would your top four be right now?
So if it's my personal rankings, I got Georgia 1. I'm going to go with let's say Alabama 2. I would put Cincinnati 3 because I respect them and I like Ritter. And then I'm going to probably put, oh man, it's tough, but I think my number 4 would probably be at the end of it, Auburn. And I don't care for Auburn, but I'd put them there.
Wow. A 6-2 Auburn team.
A 6-2 Auburn team, grizzled and on the come up, though. I think by 3-4 weeks from now, they will be one of the best teams in college football.
Well, they could really, mess all this up. I mean, that's the thing about this. Alabama being ranked number 2. When they play Georgia, say they lose to Georgia. How far will they fall? Will they fall out of the top 4 with 2 losses? I mean, no teams made it with 2 losses. If Auburn would beat them, then certainly they got to be out of it for sure. But I don't see Auburn climbing that high. I really don't.
Me neither. But they have an opportunity to really, makes a huge one of the biggest splashes in all of these rankings because they have the opportunity to play Alabama still. But the schedule they've played is stupid. They had to go all the way to Crappy Valley. It's crazy. This college football, how it's set up. And some teams are playing just way tougher schedules than other teams. Like Michigan State at 8-0, sitting pretty at 3. Congrats them for beating Michigan. But where on this schedule do you see they went and they won a game that, wow, what an impressive victory?
Well, they did beat that Miami team that Pitt lost to. However, that wasn't a Tyler Van Dyke game.
It wasn't Tyler Van Dyke. Yeah, that was way early in the season.
Same thing could be said for Alabama.
Yeah, and last week's win against Michigan for sure, impressive. Way higher scoring than I was even thinking that game too. But it's just, I don't know. There's just something about the Big Ten this year that doesn't scream elite to me. The SEC doesn't even seem as elite as normal. But it's interesting to see, like, if Wake Forest ends up going undefeated and getting into the tournament, if you will. The cool thing about it is they'll be totally unknown to all the teams that they're playing in that 4-team tournament. Like
nobody's
hardly will have any common opponents, right? Like they'll be totally an outsider if they can pull that off.
Well, that's the thing about Wake Forest to me. I mean, how they have to make it if they are undefeated at a 13-0 record. They absolutely have to make it. How can you leave out a Power 5 team that ran the table? That's those. I mean, everybody talking about Cincinnati and how they need to make it if they're undefeated. I'll tell you something right now. If Cincinnati was unranked to start the season, where do you think they would be ranked? I think maybe
barely in the top 10.
I don't think that
maybe.
Yeah, they wouldn't be higher than Wake Forest. I'll tell you that right now. They would not be higher than Wake Forest. And that's the shame of all this, is because still you think this committee that is supposed to be very unbiased and not pay attention to these other rankings still looks like they're that they're using a lot of preseason predictions to make some of these. In the case of Cincinnati, I mean, yeah, they won at Notre Dame, but I don't think that's really anything super special. Do you?
No, not and not as special as what we've seen Oregon do. Like Oregon not being ahead. I mean, obviously they have the loss, the blemish to Stanford, but the win at Ohio State. Like it's Michigan State, Michigan. They're probably going to lose to Ohio State, right? These teams are going to probably not be winning the Big Ten even. and they are being granted all this prestige already early. But of course, this is also, they do this also to get the conversation going, to get ratings and
Oh, sure.
drum up
Yeah.
interest. But when it's all said and done, just seeing these teams, and I've watched at least, I think of the top 10, at least a game or two of most of these teams, in terms of the impressive top to bottom teams, it feels more wide open than most years. So I'll give it that. It's tough to say. If you want to put Michigan at 3 right now, right, go ahead. But no way in hell I'm betting on that to last.
Well, I mean, they do have, they got Ohio State coming up. That's going to tell the story most likely. Can they win that game? If they do, then they got a clear path. If they lose that game, even if they would finish, 12 or 11-1, I don't see how you can. I don't see how they'll end up getting put in at that record. I don't know. I think maybe because they won in dramatic fashion this past week, everybody's saying they're so great. I mean, they're a good team for sure. They're a top 10 team. Don't get me wrong, but it just seems like whenever it's all said and done, unless they beat Ohio State, there's no way they're going to make it.
Yeah, that's that whole situation always just irks me whenever it's this time of year and the Big Ten is mentioned. It just never feels right. But here we are once again, as always.
Like Michigan at 7. I mean, would they beat Oklahoma State or Baylor or Texas A&M? Probably not. I don't think so.
No, and also we have. Speaking of the Big 12, though, saying Baylor there, I saw Dave Aranda really giving it up to Gary Patterson and TCU, him leaving there. That's crazy. And that just totally, I think, is the final nail in the coffin of the Big 12 right there. Patterson leaving TCU. It's all over.
Yeah. He was the linchpin holding everything together.
I mean, any semblance of what the Big 12 was and will be, I mean, it's over there. I mean, it's that is just going to be so interesting to see what happens for the future of all those teams. And don't forget, let's also mention the most interesting game of the week, Liberty and Ole Miss, Vince.
Yeah, this is one I got circled. Yeah, I expect somebody to try to run up the score on somebody.
I mean, this, in terms of like huge college football playoff implication games, in terms of big top teams facing each other, not a lot going on this week. But like when you have A&M and Auburn playing against each other, you have a former cheater facing a current probable cheater in Lane Kiffin versus Hugh Freeze. Like this is a really exciting college football weekend for me. I'm super jazzed for this. And then, of course, Wake Forest and UNC, you have the preseason favorite against the team that now out of nowhere is holding court in the ACC.
In a non-conference game, I might add.
Yeah. Does it count as non-conference?
Yep, it's a non-conference.
So this is no bearing on ACC records, this game?
Right.
I don't understand.
This is the kind of college football.
Explain that again.
Well, now the fact that there's 14 teams in the ACC and they can't play each other every year because they're in different divisions. So they said in years that we're not scheduled to play in conference, we're going to play each other anyway, which I can respect because they're trying to keep a good rivalry alive. But is this the kind of college football weekend that you feel like you're going to need to just take a shower after it's over? Because there's just so many slime ball games going on.
There's slime ball games. There's unfair games with the non-ACC UNC Wake Forest game. There's and then up and down. I mean, and I guarantee you this too. With everything going on, something weird out west will happen too. Like Boise State, Fresno State will be a bizarre ass game. Like just look out San Diego State, Hawaii. I don't know. One of those weird West Coast late night games is going to just knock your socks off, be crazy, have something memorable. This is one of those weekends, it feels like.
Yeah, so we got San Diego State traveling to the island, take on Hawaii. You got the big rivalry UTSA UTEP game that kicks off at 10:15. Nevada at home to San Jose State, kicking off at 10 o'clock. USC going to Herm Edwards, 10:30 p.m. on the East Coast. So you got your share of wild stuff that could happen there.
And not to mention Coach O's final game against Alabama.
Oh my God. What do you think the embrace is going to be like between him and Saban after the game?
Shirtless. It'll be shirtless. LSU beating Alabama. Coach O's taking his shirt off and chasing Nick Saban down. That's my prediction.
I would be shocked if that happened.
Could be the big shocker of the weekend, Vince. Any predictions for the weekend? Maybe a Pitt score?
Well, yeah. I guess we got to go. I think they're going to, regroup, and they're going to come out and they're going to win this game. I'm going to say a score of, I'm going to say 56-14.
Man, I hope it's that much. I'm thinking more like 44-5.
A safety late.
Yeah, I think the safety Pitt got last week's going to go into Duke's favor this week.
Okay.
Izzy's going to trip up in the end zone, unfortunately. Early in the game, though, we'll be all right.
All right. I could see that.
So there you have it. We both have Pitt covering. Let us know what you got at H2P Show. And, of course, go Navy, beat Notre Dame. Right, Vince?
Yeah. That you want to talk about something wild that could happen this weekend. That might be it.
Oh, man. On a bad Navy year, too. That would be fun to watch. So be on the lookout for some bizarre-ass college football this weekend. Most importantly, seeing Pitt get back on track, Vince. Tough show to do. Knew that this might be the case even after ending last week's show full of optimism because, well, we are the Pittsburgh Panthers. But here we are. But the good thing is we're used to it. We're moving on. Anything else to say that we haven't said yet to leave us with?
No, I think we about covered it all, and hail to Pitt.
There you go. And also, I do still have hope for Kenny winning the Heisman. All he needs to do, is go out there, throw maybe 8 touchdowns against Duke, maybe go out there, throw maybe 6 to 9 against UNC. It's not impossible.
Well, if he beats that undefeated, unstoppable Wake Forest team in the ACC championship game, everybody's going to be saying, wow, nobody else could do that except him.
Where were you when Kenny was the one to beat Wake Forest? What year are we in? What bizarre-ass ACC are we in? 2021, man. Just keep watching. Here we go. Kenny Pickett's still the big man on campus. He'll get on track. We'll be back next week to talk about Pitt's victory over Duke and move forward with all of you. Thanks for listening on your favorite podcast platform. Tell your Pitt friends. Tell your Pitt family. We'll see you next week. Hail to Pitt, everybody.
Standing here today.